What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the new animated movie To Your Last Death, which comes out March 17th on VOD and cable. And not to worry, because this movie's not coming out for a couple of days, I will keep this review spoiler-free. If you've been following movie news, you'll know that tons of movies are being postponed to be released later in the year due to the coronavirus. So people are going to be watching a lot of movies at home, but if your taste in animation goes to the dark side, or you enjoy gallows humor, or you just enjoy abundant gore, To Your Last Death might be right up your alley. I absolutely love this kind of animation. Movies like Heavy Metal or Ralph Bakshi's Coonskin, they satisfy a need that I have that just doesn't get satisfied at all by movies by Pixar or DreamWorks or whomever. If I'm taking my nieces and nephews to the movies, that's fine. But when I'm watching animation on my own, I want to see hardcore stuff like Akira or Golgo 13 The Professional. And historically, we've had this strange divide where in the world of movies, animation tends to be very innocent. But on TV, we get all these crazy shows like Archer and Metalocalypse and South Park. And I've always struggled with that, where people are willing to watch this really crazy hardcore animation on TV, but if you go to the theater, it's all animation for young children. And I've even worked in the world of animation a bit. As a producer, I've produced 2 animated short films with director Bill Plympton, as well as his feature film Cheatin'. And Cheatin' has loads of sex and violence and humor and all that stuff that I love. But maybe To Your Last Death has figured out the right approach, where you make your animated feature film, but you gear it towards VOD, cable, streaming platforms, etc. But if you haven't seen the trailer, the premise for this movie is absolutely wild. It actually reminds me quite a bit of some of these old Marvel comics I used to love from the late 70s, like Contest of the Champions, where you have these cosmic entities creating a life or death game where people are going to have to fight to survive for the amusement of these godlike people. And the game that's being explored is one where this incredibly wealthy, powerful businessman has figured out that he's dying from a brain tumor. And as a way of putting all of his affairs in order, he plans on torturing to death all 4 of his adult children. But what the Game Master allows is for the main character, Miriam, to go back in time 24 hours with all the knowledge about what's going to happen to see if she can survive the night. And in spite of this being kind of a low-budget, rudimentary, GarageBand animated film, they've assembled an incredible cast for this movie, including Morena Baccarin, who plays the Game Master. I absolutely loved her in things like Firefly and Deadpool. For the villainous Cyrus DeKalb, you've got the great Ray Wise, who I've been a huge fan of since the days of like RoboCop and Twin Peaks. And then as the overseer, basically the voiceover narration for the movie, you have the one and only pop culture icon, William Shatner himself. And I absolutely love it when I see actors willing to take a huge risk on this kind of material, because this movie doesn't pretend to be a coming-of-age fable. It doesn't try to be a morality tale in any way, shape, or form. It's basically designed to provide you with as much violence, carnage, and humor as possible over the course of 90 minutes. Now, I wouldn't say this movie's 100% successful at that every step of the way. The first half is probably stronger than the second half. But there's so many cool ingredients at play in this movie that I strongly encourage people to watch it, especially if your taste in animation leans towards content that many might deem to be inappropriate or problematic. Like as soon as I hear people talking about a movie or show as inappropriate or problematic, I'm like, all right, well, sign me up. That sounds like my kind of thing. And while this movie is 100% a self-contained story, you can definitely tell that they're trying to tee up or cue up a possible franchise, where you can see the Game Master and all of her galactic gamblers setting up a variety of bizarre scenarios where people have to fight to the death. And by a strange coincidence, this movie's coming out a couple days after The Hunt, which is yet another movie about a high-stakes game where people have to fight to the death. And I do want to call attention to a few specific things that are not spoilers, but are really crucial ingredients that I particularly enjoyed. There are times where the movie starts to feel a little bit like an animated comic where, as a way of editing, instead of cutting from scene to scene, the camera will pan from panel to panel, but within those panels, things are animated. So it creates this really interesting hybrid approach or hybrid style where it just gives you so much eye candy to enjoy. Or it uses really interesting techniques like split screen, which obviously Brian De Palma has used to great effect in his movies. But I think what I like more than anything is the hand-drawn animation. I lean towards animation where you can see the hand and the personality of the artist at play. And while the animation at times might seem a little crude, it actually is kind of part of the charm when they're running and you're hearing this really cool kind of synthy techno-pop music in the background. All these little stylistic flourishes, they all just seem to flow together in a really harmonious fashion. And as somebody who spent several decades reading comics, I really like the world building of this. The idea that there's this giant red cosmic vacuum of space filled with all these otherworldly entities that are playing with and manipulating human beings like chess pieces for their own amusement. It reminded me quite a bit of all the various cosmic entities in Marvel Comics like the Living Tribunal, in Eternity and Death, etc. But the coolest thing has to be the character design, because the Game Master, she just looks so badass. She's got these shades and she's got this like really erotic and sexy red armor that she wears, but every once in a while she'll kind of demon out and show just how much power that she contains within her. And when it comes to the various torture sequences or elaborate death scenes that Ray Wise's character has cooked up for all of his ungrateful children, there's a lot of creativity when it came to the various torture devices. And I don't want to give away the actual traps that the people find themselves in, because that's part of what keeps the movie so spontaneous and fresh. But if you've ever been to a medieval museum where you look at thumb screws and all the various torture devices, they've got nothing on these traps that Mr. DeKalb has cooked up for his 4 kids. And the folks who made this movie very kindly gave me early access to the film, including a little press kit with a great interview with director Jason Axon, who made this. And they're asking him a lot of questions about his background in filmmaking and his inspiration for this movie. And as soon as I read his responses, I knew he was going to be my kind of filmmaker, because he says, my parents had very eclectic taste in cinema, especially when it came to animated films. I grew up watching Heavy Metal, Fantastic Planet, and Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, all of which were amazing and influential. I always hoped to have a chance to direct animation. Also, if you've not seen Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, that movie's wildly inconsistent, and sadly, he never got to finish the story, because the movie basically stopped right in the middle of Two Towers. He never got to make the second movie that he had planned on making. But I would argue that the Mines of Moria sequence in Ralph Bakshi's film is even stronger than what Peter Jackson managed to achieve in Fellowship of the Ring. But Jason Axon, he's got tons of experience. He's made over 150 short films, and a lot of his clients have included the Black Eyed Peas, Funny or Die, or the Upright Citizens Brigade. But this is his first feature film, and I think he's got enormous potential moving ahead into the future. Also, I should give a shout out to actor Bill Moseley, who's in this movie, plays the character Pavel. Bill Moseley's appeared in all kinds of cool horror flicks, in particular the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is oftentimes unfairly maligned because it's so much more funny and irreverent than the first movie. But I feel like Tobe Hooper had said all he had to say with the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so he was well within his rights to make the second one truly deranged. So I won't make the case that this movie is for everybody, and even for people who love graphic hardcore animation, even they might have some reservations about the second half, because like I said, it does slow down. But if you like seeing things like animated characters spitting blood right into the screen, or people having their limbs hacked off, or animated characters in a state of undress, this is absolutely going to be your kind of thing. And a huge part of what makes this movie work is the fact that Miriam and her siblings are incredibly well fleshed out by the writers. Like any siblings, just because they're adults doesn't mean they don't bicker and fight anymore. And part of the fun of this movie is how both the father as well as the game master keep manipulating the 4 children, where they find themselves constantly turning on each other, and you're never quite sure which ones are allies, which ones are enemies. Because the game master and the other gamblers, they just want to see a great contest, while the father, more than anything, he just wants all of his children dead. And if you do watch this, make sure you stick around for not one but 2 post-credit scenes, which very clearly are trying to set up a sequel or possible TV show. I don't know if this would be better as a TV series or as a series of movies, because we're also getting into strange territory now where if movies are going straight to streaming services, the differences between a show and a movie start to get a little blurry. In any event, I would 100% watch another story set in this world, and I would absolutely watch another movie with this creative team. And I wish there are more filmmakers out there who are willing to explore this kind of sadistic, profane terrain that so rarely gets explored in American feature films, which is so unusual because in other parts of the world like France or different countries in Eastern Europe, or particularly in Japan, they have absolutely no trouble understanding that some animated movies are geared toward an adult sensibility and some are geared toward a more innocent sensibility. So anytime filmmakers are willing to take this kind of risk, I will always be there to support their efforts. At any rate, I think I've said all I can say without going into spoilers, because I wish I could talk about certain things, but I feel like part of the joy of watching this movie will be seeing all the truly deranged scenes that this movie has in store for you. Plus, there's nothing new coming out in the theaters for weeks, so you've got absolutely nothing to lose trying something unusual and unconventional like To Your Last Death. So I hope I've done a good job of stimulating your curiosity, but just watch the trailer. If the trailer seems like your thing, the movie's going to be your thing. The trailer does an excellent job of telling you precisely what kind of experience is in store for you when you watch this movie. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up, but if you want to talk more about animation, you can always find me on Twitter at Colrex, or leave a comment in the comments below. But I can't thank you enough for watching the video. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell. But I hope everyone has an amazing weekend, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.